know what, man? The thing about me is that the fights that I have, they don't.
You broke my collarbone, 3 of my ribs, and fractured.
There is one thing Hollywood has always believed: if Michael Jai White walks into a room, he is the strongest man there. A man holding black belts in 7 disciplines, sparring like a starving tiger testing its territory. Michael is always the one others stay cautious around. But then he met The Game. The one man who was not afraid of him. In an instant, the universe flipped. The Game is not just a rapper. He is a product of street violence raised among gunshots and trained in boxing as if it were a survival instinct carved into his bones. A man even the king of martial arts had to admit strong. Very strong. And more aggressive than I expected. And in just one sparring session, one punch with a little too much force, 1 second too slow to react. The very next day, Michael Jai White suddenly announced he had to pause filming for health reasons. People said it was just an accident. But the truth is darker than that. What really happened between Michael Jai White and The Game? Why did 2 men who once respected each other turn a gym into a battlefield? And most importantly, who truly walked out of that session with a higher position? Keep watching, because this story is not just an accident. One Hollywood's haunting phantom. Michael Jai White is not the kind of Hollywood tough guy who only talks big on screen. He is among the very few action actors whose punches come from a lifetime of real martial arts practice. Michael does not create the image of a warrior. He is a warrior. White began training martial arts at the age of 4. A child who could not even read the whole alphabet already knew how to lock arms, throw bodies, and shift hips in jiu-jitsu. Then Shotokan, Taekwondo, Kyokushin. The kinds of disciplines where even the names smell of sweat and bruise-stained mats. Black belt after black belt. By adulthood, Michael had earned 7, even 8 black belts in various disciplines. In other words, he was the king of martial arts. And with a martial arts foundation as solid as steel, Hollywood was simply an open door. Michael had acting talent, something rare for someone raised in dojos. The combination of martial discipline and sensitivity before the camera made him an exception in action cinema. Not Stallone, not Siegel. Michael Jai White is the type of fighter who acts not an actor pretending to be a fighter. Michael Jai White is the silent nightmare of film sets. Not the type who abuses power bullies others, or thinks he is the center of the universe like Siegel. Not someone who likes to dominate anyone. But he is dangerous in another way, the kind that makes people nearly wet themselves just from his sharp stare. There were stories whispered from film sets, one mistimed fall causing a colleague's shoulder to pop. One joint lock applied a bit too far, leaving a co-star unable to continue shooting. Low kicks on stuntmen to check whether they were wearing proper protection. He did these things not to intimidate. He did them because that was his standard of training. On screen, he is a warrior. In real life, he is not much different. And then, on a fine day, when The Game walked into the gym, Michael still carried the old mindset, a rapper, a celeb, a light spar. But there was one thing Michael did not know. The Game was not the kind of rapper who steps into a ring just to take photos. Not someone who lets others test lightly for fun. And certainly, not someone he should ever underestimate. 2. The Game, the opposite energy. A quick look at The Game. One of the most influential rappers in America. He came from Compton, a place where lessons in violence came before childhood memories. His upbringing was full of cracks, being beaten, cornered into dark places, and once nearly shot to death, while still a boy too young to fully grasp what death meant. Those traumatic experiences did not just leave scars on his body, they imprinted themselves onto his character, the kind of survival instinct that made him react faster than he thinks, and always remain ready to strike back. But from that wreckage, Game found hip-hop, a lifeline he clung to in order to pull himself out of Compton's spiral. His earliest recordings were released through Get Low Records with the project Untold Story, a name that sounded like a confession. That mixtape sold more than 82,000 copies in just 3 months, a number even supported artists could only dream of. People said that album laid the first bricks for his rise, making the name The Game echo across the West Coast. But there is one thing audiences did not know. Before being known as a rapper, he joined a gang not to look dangerous, but because it was the only way not to become a victim again. He once said that if he had not joined a gang, he would either have been killed or forced to flee the very place he grew up in. What is interesting is that despite a chaotic past game, maintained physical discipline. He always said training was what kept his mind from slipping back into the old darkness. Anyone who has followed his journey knows Game did not go to the gym for fun. He trained in boxing, seriously ran long distances, ate like a real athlete. People may argue about his temper debate, his scandals, and the fights that followed him throughout his career, but no one denies this. The Game is one of the few rappers who at a glance you immediately know. This man does more than rap. And because he lived in a culture of hit for real, live for real Game, was never someone who let others bully him. His legal troubles, fights, conflicts, scandals were not always right, but they were the result of who he was, always reacting, never backing down, never allowing anyone to disrespect him. When you grow up in a place where one wrong look can lead to something serious, you learn one thing: be tough before anyone tries you. 3. The sparring context. Two worlds collide. The small gym in the middle of LA was where the quake happened. And in that seemingly quiet place, the story people still whisper about the spar between Michael Jai White and the Game began. The spar was labeled light. Everyone present thought it would be simple. A celeb meets a martial artist exchange. A few techniques, laugh, and go home. Michael Jai White arrived casually, carrying the confidence of someone who had sparred with every kind of opponent. The Game walked in silently, wrapping his hands slowly, like someone familiar with gym rhythm, but not trying to show off. Everything started according to plan. Light jabs, basic footwork, both men feeling each other out. Nothing unusual, until the Game punched a little deeper. Not a strike strong enough to start a fight, just a punch that was not for show. It carried the weight of someone who grew up in a place where punches usually came before explanations. A few onlookers began to pay attention, their eyes shifting from indifferent to curious. Michael Jai White sensed it quickly. He checked his guard, adjusted his distance. The next jab from the Game went straight into MJW's glove, forcing him to step back half a beat. Not because of pain, but because he realized the man in front of him was not like the other celebs he had sparred with. The Game's rhythm was different. There was recklessness in it, heat, what people in gyms call street energy. MJW changed attitude instantly. He raised his guard higher, pivoted more precisely, switching to serious training mode. To remind the Game to keep it light, MJW threw a front kick to measure distance, but the Game did not slow down at all. He stepped back half a step, then came forward again as if the kick was just a greeting. The air changed from here. People training in the far corner paused and looked over. A few crossed their arms and stood closer to the ropes. You could feel the sudden silence, the kind that tells everyone this is no longer a light spar. MJW began using proper combinations. Quick, sharp jab cross-hook sequences meant to regain control. But the Game did not reduce his pace. He stepped back by exactly one beat, then countered with a heavy cross that forced MJW to shift left. The whole gym froze for 1 or 2 seconds. No one spoke, but everyone knew that punch was no longer within light limits. MJW looked at Game, looked back. That look was like two men speaking without words. I won't back down, neither will I. From there, the spar turned into what fighters call an ego spar. No announcement, no shouting, but everyone understood whoever slowed down first would lose face. MJW pressed the pace. The Game pressed too. MJW tried to clinch to control him, but Game swatted his arms away, almost refusing to be dominated. MJW changed angles. The Game changed instantly. Every movement felt like a test of strength, not just technique, but pride. The coach outside the ring grew tense. He stepped closer to the ropes, voice raised slightly. Light chill. But anyone who has fought knows once. Adrenaline kicks in. Words become echoes. Everything was moving faster than expected, and no one knew what would happen next. Then, a mistimed hook appeared. No one saw clearly from which angle, but it made the entire ring pause for a heartbeat. Some said MJW jolted, eyes widening not from pain, but surprise. Others said, the Game reacted too fast, making the strike land heavier than intended. There was no camera, so no one can verify. Only vague stories. But everyone agreed on one thing: that strike was the boundary. The boundary between sparring and real fighting. And right after that hook, the atmosphere thickened. Sharper, more charged. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. A small gym in LA suddenly felt like two worlds facing off: a martial artist with decades of technique and a rapper forged by Compton's instincts. No one expected a light spar to become a moment of testing each other's core. But everyone there knew one truth in some sessions. Once heart rates rise, no one cares about the original plan anymore. All that remains are instinct, experience, and how each man protects his pride. The session ended, but no one left immediately. Some exchanged slight smiles, the kind that say, "What did we just witness?" And like all rare stories in real combat gyms, it began to spread. Not through articles or videos, but through quiet retellings. Hey, yesterday, MJW sparred the game. Hard. No joke, they almost fought for real. And that alone was enough for a simple spar to become a lasting rumor. Because some moments in the ring speak louder than any long interview. They show people who each man really is. And they show that sometimes within those four ropes, two worlds collide in ways no one ever expects. 4. The incident that caused the conflict. According to those who were present that day, Michael Jai White stepped into the clinch not to attack, but to test the rhythm and see whether the game knew how to handle body pressure like a real fighter. For MJW, this was only a light test, a directional trip to see how the other man kept his balance. But his mistake was forgetting that the man in front of him was not a celeb who enjoyed playful boxing, but someone raised in Compton, where people react instinctively to any close pressure. The game did not back down. That is the detail everyone repeats. He did not evade, did not wait for MJW to lead the rhythm, did not loosen up to play along. He pushed back harder than MJW expected, as if his body itself said, "Do not think I am someone you can steer." And that instinctive counter completely flipped the mood in the gym. A collision with a dry thud, not the soft glove tap usually heard in sparring. It was loud enough that everyone around stopped moving. Anyone who was wrapping their hands paused. Anyone putting a towel into their bag froze. Not because someone was injured, but because they clearly felt the thin boundary between training and real fighting had just been crossed. People say the mistimed moment came from both sides. MJW applied slightly too much pressure. Game responded with slightly too much force. And thus the hook or the shove burst out in a way neither fully controlled. A brief jolt, a faint foot slide on the boxing floor, then complete silence, except for breathing. The coach nearby shouted, "Chill, chill." The reflex of someone who had seen too many sparring sessions turn sour. But the shout did not clear the heavy energy in the air. Between the two men, their eyes locked like two blades testing their sharpness. No one spoke, but the silence was so loud it stung the ears. Everyone present understood this was a dropped rhythm moment like DMX and Seagal years ago. An incident where everything was supposed to follow the routine, the correct pace, the spirit of light sparring, but suddenly flipped into a test of pride. From that moment, the session no longer had the color of exercise. It turned into self-defense. And when two men both feel they cannot be the one to step back, first, the air inside the ring, already hot from breath, becomes heated by pure tension. Everyone understood one more mistimed strike, and this would no longer be sparring. It would become a collision between two worlds. 5. The rumor of almost a real fight. There was no camera capturing that moment, and no one openly claimed to have seen everything clearly. But the story grew within every breath in the gym. Game checked MJW's respect. People recounted that Michael Jai White's expression after that counter was different. Not fear. MJW is a real martial artist who has sparred with UFC champions. But something like genuine surprise. The surprise of someone who thought he was teaching a lesson to a playful rapper, only to realize he was facing a man shaped by fists, not a turkey for fun. Some witnesses said, MJW narrowed his eyes, adjusted his form, corrected his breathing. The signs of a serious fighter who feels the person in front of him is no longer a sparring partner, but a man testing him. Because the game has always been like that. He does not know how to act. He does not pretend to be tough. He lives tough. Once he steps into the ring, everything that belongs to the stage, the artistry, the lights, the lyrics, is left at the door. In there, only Compton remains in his blood the street lessons carved into his reflexes. Game does not back down when forced into rhythm. He does not cool down when the opponent increases the pace. For him, every strike is an answer to a question never spoken aloud. How much do you respect me? Rumor said the sparring session that day got hotter than expected. No one confirmed it, but no one denied it either. And that is what made the story spread faster than fire. It felt like those urban legends in martial arts circles. No clips, no formal testimony needed. Just the right people, the right context, and the right pair of names. Michael Jai White, the Hollywood martial artist, and the game, the street fighter, with Compton in his soul. That alone was enough to freeze the entire gym for a few seconds, enough for the story to burst into dozens of versions, each hotter than the last. Some said MJW intended to go lighter afterwards. Others said Game even stepped half a beat forward, as if inviting MJW into a trial by fire. No one knows exactly what happened, but everyone agrees on one point. That day, the boundary between spar and fight disappeared in an instant. And in that very instant, both men understood that this sparring session was no longer a drill, but a warning. A reminder that sometimes the man you think is just a rapper is someone who does not know how to retreat once the real fighting rhythm begins. 6. Decoding Michael Jai White. Why misunderstandings happen so easily. Michael Jai White always walks into the gym with a very specific attitude. Silent, disciplined, and serious, as if it were the final competition day of his life. Outsiders may think he is showing off, but anyone who has seen him train with real fighters knows this is how he has survived decades of practice. There is no concept of training for fun, training socially, training lightly. For a clip. For Michael, a sparring session always follows dojo standards where every jab must be precise, every kick must show controlled intent, and everyone in the ring must understand the purpose of every movement. Michael was forged in karate, kickboxing, kyokushin, and later entered Hollywood with the habit of never lowering his standard, simply because the other person is not a professional fighter. That is why in sparring sessions with celebs or rappers like The Game, this difference easily becomes misunderstanding. Many in the community say, Michael is straightforward to an extreme. If someone hits hard, he hits hard back. If someone forgets control, he immediately resets the rhythm. If someone attacks without balance, he lets them feel a corrective force strong enough to understand this is not a performance. It does not come from malice. Simply because for Michael, sparring is never half-hearted. If you step into the ring with me, I respect you as a real opponent, he once said. And that sentence, depending on who hears it, may sound like praise or like a warning. Michael's challenge lies in his very aura. To an ordinary person, he may appear a bit cold, a bit stern, somewhat like an alpha trying to assert dominance. But those who train long enough know it is a self-protection habit. When an opponent throws a mistimed or slightly heavy strike, any fighter reacts defensively or counters to re-establish distance. The difference is that Michael's reactions are too fast, too instinctive, too precise, making the inexperienced think he is trying to intimidate. That is why stories of Michael Jai White going a bit heavy and sparring with celebs always drift around gyms in LA. Some fighters said that when training with Michael, if they increased their force by 10%, he would immediately raise the rhythm by 20%. Not to hurt them, but to keep both safe. In martial arts, when one loses control, risk rises quickly. And Michael is the type who maintains the stability of the exchange, not letting emotions lead. But for people from the streets, where confrontation is a survival reflex, Michael's corrections can easily be misread as he is trying to prove something. If The Game throws a jab harder than typical sparring intensity, Michael will immediately respond with a rhythm check to restore balance. But in the eyes of a rapper from Compton, that rhythm check can easily translate to, "Are you testing me?" These tiny differences within just a few seconds are enough to shift the energy in the ring. Not because either is wrong, but because they come from two worlds that do not share the same language. One is taught that sparring requires discipline and conscious control. The other grew up where if someone hits a beat too hard, you hit back to keep your position. The beauty and the danger lies in the fact that Michael is not doing anything wrong. He is simply the truest version of a fighter, disciplined, instinctive, precise. But placed next to The Game, someone who brings street instinct into the ring. Michael's extreme seriousness unintentionally gives the impression that he is bullying, overpowering, or looking down on his opponent. In reality, Michael does not think rappers are weaker or unworthy partners. But from the game's perspective, some of Michael's movements, the way he locks arms, rotates his hips, or changes footwork angles, carry signs of asserting dominance. Those who train long enough will see everything as normal. But for someone with a strong ego and a Street Fighter foundation, like Game, that feeling is enough to trigger fight back mode. That is the core reason their sparring session became more intense than expected. Both are strong, both react instinctively, based on their upbringing. And when two strong instincts meet, misunderstanding becomes almost certain. The issue here is not that Michael is wrong or Game is hot-headed. It is the simple truth that when a man from the dojo, where technique is valued above emotion, and a man from the street, where courage is valued above rules, stand in the same ring, what remains is the intersection of two completely different mindsets. Not right, not wrong. Just two worlds looking at each other through two different lenses. And sometimes that very difference creates the moments of collision people remember forever. 7. Confirming the rumor. That moment in the gym felt as if time itself had been squeezed tight. Everyone tells it the same way. After just one small mistimed beat, the spar between Michael Jai White and the Game was no longer light training. It shifted into something thicker, heavier, like two animals testing each other's territory. People could clearly hear the sound of gloves hitting skin feet turning on the mat and the harsh breathing that never shows up in friendly spars. The whole room was drawn tight like a guitar string, just waiting for someone to tug too hard and snap it. And then the moment everyone keeps mentioning is when the Game threw a hook that went a bit deeper than on rhythm, or when Michael Jai White answered with a control shot that landed a bit heavier than planned. No one remembers exactly who started it, only that the atmosphere changed instantly. Half a second, no more, but enough for everyone to hold their breath. No one was badly hurt. No one went down. There was no blood like in an action film. But what got hit was something much bigger: pride. Michael Jai White, the man who had sparred with John Jones, trained with Uriah Hall, had never imagined a rapper would dare stand firm under his pace. And the Game, the one raised on street reflexes, had no intention of backing down in front of a Hollywood black belt either. Two different worlds, one from the dojo and one from Compton, suddenly met at the exact edge where instinct pushes past reason. The coach had to step in between them, but everyone could see what did not need saying: neither man wanted to be the one to stop first. That very day, the rumor spread like a burn. From the gym to the car park, then through the mouths of the regular spar guys, and by the weekend, every gym in LA was murmuring the same line: Game handled himself. People said, the Game not only held his ground, but forced Michael Jai White to get serious again. Some even claimed MJW nodded at Game after the session. A nod full of meaning, not the polite kind, but the nod one fighter gives another. MJW respected him after that. That sentence popped up so many times that no one could tell anymore where truth ended and embellishment began. But everyone liked to believe it, because the story just sounded right. The emotional punch of the whole thing sat in one very small moment: the way Michael Jai White looked at the Game after that strike. That look was no longer the way you look at a celeb dropping by for a fun session, and not the way you look at a rapper trying to seem tough either. It was the gaze of a real fighter realizing he was facing someone who could not be taken lightly, and the people who were there said it in the clearest way. That day, Michael Jai White understood that the Game was not just a rapper. That moment, even without a single camera recording, it was enough to become a small legend in the LA fight scene. The sort of story where whenever it comes up, people smirk and say, yeah, that day was hotter than a proper spar. 8. The legacy left behind. Some collisions are born to stay in memory, even when there is no knockout, no crowd cheering, no referee lifting anyone's hand. The spar between Michael Jai White and the Game is exactly that kind of moment. A brief clash that peeled back the glossy mask of the Hollywood tough guy and exposed the raw, bristling reality of a street fighter raised in scarred Compton. It was not a battle to find out whose name was stronger. It was more like a moment in front of a mirror, where both men saw in the other's eyes something they had not expected: respect. Michael Jai White stepped into the ring that day, with his capital of technique, his martial artist reputation, and the confidence that Hollywood had built around him. In the world of film sets, where he was the one calling the shots on strikes and setting the rhythm of every impact, imposing the pace of a spar, was second nature. But facing the game, someone who does not know how to act tough, only how to be tough, he realized there are things technique cannot decode. A jab that dug deeper than expected, a gaze that did not flinch, a reflex so natural it felt as if Game had lived his whole life in a state of defense. And Michael understood the street has a language no dojo teaches. He did not lose, but what got knocked out of him was the thought that a rapper is just a rapper. For the Game, that spar felt like a final statement to a world used to seeing him through the surface. Hard lyrics, loud beefs, West Coast macho style. In the moment, he stood in front of someone like Michael Jai White, tall, technically sharp as a blade, with a martial background that even many real fighters respect. Game did not choose to step back or protect his image. He chose what he always had: instinctive reaction. That reflex did not come from a studio or a marketing campaign. It came from Compton, from years growing up in gang politics, from a survival instinct carved into everyone who lives there like a tattoo that can never fade. And it was exactly that reflex that made MJW see him differently. Game did not win, but he gained something more important: recognition. That spar quickly became something whispered around gyms in Los Angeles. No cameras, no leaked footage, no one really knowing every detail of how it played out. But the rumor lived longer than the facts, because it was not just a story about two men trading blows. It was a meeting of two worlds. On one side, Hollywood martial arts, clean, precise, controlled. On the other, street-level aggression, rough, real, impossible to fake. Two value systems smashed together, leaving no physical wounds, but leaving a mark in the minds of those who saw it. And like every urban legend, this story ends with a question that sinks into the listener longer than the spar itself. That sometimes those short seconds in an empty gym reveal human nature more clearly than any role, any fame. That sometimes a sudden flash of intensity is not there to prove who is better, but to remind us that the truth of a person is not on the stage or in the spotlight, but in the way they stand firm when faced with real force coming towards them. And sometimes, only sometimes, the brief light inside a gym speaks more about a man than an entire career on stage.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.